Pom-poms, every winter we have hats or other articles of clothing that have pom-poms on them. The pom-poms are made of threads. Generally they're made of wool threads. And there's always a thread which is attaching the pom-pom to the garment, which could be linen. This I had taken off a sweater, the belt of a sweater, where the thread in the middle, which was holding all the threads of the pom-pom together, was pure linen. Now the linen thread here and the wool thread were both 2-ply threads, which means it was Shatnez Deiraisa according to the Rebbeinu Tam and according to Rabbi Yosef. So what has to be checked? Wool items raise a red flag. Maybe there are Shatnez in them. Linen items, of course. Here I have a linen jacket that this boy didn't even think to check. He was only accustomed to checking wool items, but here's a wool jacket which is full. This is a linen jacket which is full of wool components. So all jackets, even if it's a polyester viscose jacket, linen look fabrics like we pointed out, if the fabrics look like they're a mixture, multicolored fabrics, that means all different types of threads, and trimmings and appliques. The garment has a trimming and applique. Those are types of garments where even if they're polyester, even they're acrylic, they sometimes require testing. So Shatnez is not only in clothing, it extends further than that, and that's learned out of the Pasuk in Parshas Kedoshim, where the Pasuk tells us, "Uveget kil'ayim Shatnez lo yale alecha." So really there's 2 psukim. One pasuk is like silbash, which is referring more to clothing. And la yale alecha is hala, is even covering yourself with a blanket, or there's other forms of hala. Another form of hala is sitting on a soft couch, where when you sit in the middle of the couch, the pillows of the couch will come up on the sides of you. So that's a form of halo, which is a shaila in the Rishonim if it's the Raisa or the Rabbana. But al kaponim, sitting on the couch, is definitely a issa de Rabbana. So even though the Torah says lo yale alecha, aval ato matziyoi tachtecha, but you're allowed to sit on it. But the Rabbanan made a gzera that you're not allowed to sit on Shatnez. Now, really there's a stira between the Gemara and the Mishnah. The Gemara in Beitza says, Afilu al gabe esem matzois. There's 10 mats, and the bottom one is Shatnez, is also to sit on the top. But the Mishnah says, Akarim v'akastois, the pillows and the blankets, ain't b'hem mishum kilayim, do not have an issa of Shatnez. Ubilvad shelo yiga b'sori b'hem, providing you don't have direct contact, no direct skin contact. So if a person is sitting, let's say the couch is Shatnez, and there's something on the couch which is separating between the person and the couch, so the Mishnah is saying, Ubilvad shelo yiga b'sori b'hem, so it would be mutter. So there's a stira between the Mishnah and the Gemara. So the Mechaber, the Beis Yosef, is miyashav, he makes a chiluk between rachim and koshim. If it's rachim, if it's soft, then it's a problem. That's afilu al gabe esem atzois. If it's koshim, if it's hard, then it wouldn't be a problem. Now really we don't know what's called koshim and what's called rachim. But one thing we do know is put on the orthopedic mattresses that we have today. Those are considered koshim. So if you have a mattress that is Shatnez, which is hard, and you cover it with a sheet, so you're not sleeping directly on that mattress, that wouldn't be a problem of Shatnez. Couches are always considered soft, but today the upholstery materials used in couches and chairs, that's not a problem of Shatnez. But what we do find, sometimes you have these decorative pillows. Sleeping pillows is not an issue, but sometimes you find a fancy pillow to throw onto the couch. That sometimes could be a problem, and the problem we find with that is, like here's an example, this was found in the Flatbush lavatory, where it was a linen pillow, all the maroon, all the red is pure linen, and the flowers embroidered on is wool. And it's also to sleep on it or to hold it against your chest. Sometimes these pillows that you buy are filled with recycled materials. Recycled materials is a chashash of Shatnez, because what happens is the factories, the end of the day, you have all these leftover remnants of pieces of materials and threads and fibers. It's all swept up and sent off to a different company where it's cleaned and processed and used for stuffings and many different things. So if the factory is making clothing of wool and clothing of linen, so in that mix you will have wool and linen. And the shaila is, how do we look at recycled materials? So some guys can make a lot of sfeikos out of it. Aleph, there's a suffix if there's sem or pishtim over here. A second suffix, is it in the forms of fibers or threads? Another suffix they make is the wool and linen touching, like we spoke of before. That's a machlekes, the Rambam and the Rosh, if that would be Shatnez or not. So the Mitzaref, a lot of sfeikos, and Memela, they say it's okay. The Chazon Ish was machmer. The Chazon Ish said that one shouldn't use anything that's recycled. And still today, the Bnei Brak Shatnez Laboratory will not put a Shatnez label on a garment that has something recycled in it. With Shmuel Deutsch, this is about 60 years ago. So Shmuel Deutsch related this ma'aser to my son. He said over that when he was learning in Slobodka about 60 years ago, that's when the Chazon Ish came out with his psak that you shouldn't use recycled materials. And the problem was that the psak came out on Erev Yom Kippur. So all the bochim in Yeshiva Slobodka were not able to take their jackets to be checked by the Shatnez Laboratory. So that Yom Kippur, the entire yeshiva davened without their jackets. So they wore their hats, but no jackets. I was covered for the Chazon Ish. So there's a special bracha for those being nizah in Shatnez. We see it's not so easy to be nizah in Shatnez. I have a display of garments over here. We had an issue with this past winter. We had an issue with two things. We had an issue with boots. These are the Ugg boots. These are wool. This fur over here is wool. And then at the bottom over here around the rim is linen. So here you have wool and linen. So firstly, there was poskim that wanted to say that this has a din of oireis kevosim. Oireis kevosim, the Mechaber says in Simon Reis Hadites, that if oireis kevosim are allowed to be sewn with a linen thread. And this Uggs is known for sheepskin. So they assume that this was sheepskin. So even though it has linen on around the sole, it's not a problem of Shatnez. This is what some poskim wanted to say. However, in truth this is not considered oireis kevosim, if this would be Iris Kavasim, it would look something similar to this. This is Iris Kavasim. If you have skin, which has this wool attached to it, so the wool won't look as neat as it looks over here. And if you go online or you do some research, you'll see that Uggs has two types of Uggs. They have one what's called twin face, and then they have the real Uggs. The real Uggs is taka oris kavasim, but the wool appears as if it's hanging from a sheepskin. It has a very raw look to it. Here the wool is being combed. It's all the lengths of the fibers are all the same length. So this is processed wool. This shua has been done to this. It's not shua tavi and nuz, but it's shua. So this is considered wool. This won't be a case of Shatnez Deiraisa because you don't have all three steps, shua tavi and nuz, but it's at least Shatnez Deirabana. So this was one issue that we had this past winter. Another issue, which is something which isn't thought of here in the Hamoidia, and last week there was an article about Talesim. This is the talis that it started out with. We gave one of our Talmidim gave a shir in Hanot about Shatnez, and he mentioned alterations. Now this is the rule regarding alterations. Alterations is only an issue if there was a piece of material that was added. We don't have to be chayshish that the seamstress used threads of linen. Sewing machines cannot hold linen thread. So most of the threads that they have in a tailor shop, in a cleaners, are types of threads that fit onto a sewing machine. So therefore we don't have to be chayshish that they use linen thread. But there is always a chashash, if they added a piece of material, they could have added a piece of wool to a linen garment, or added linen to a wool garment. So the boy, the one who gave the shir, mentioned that, and after the shir, an older person came and he asked that he checks his talis, and this was the actual talis. He said a piece of material was added by a cleaner in Borough Park, and he looked at it, and the piece that was added was a pure piece of linen. So he brought more talesim to be checked, and it was nispara. He had 6 talesim that he had fixed over a period of 10 years, and they had all been fixed with linen. So we contacted the cleaners, which happened to be a Yiddish cleaners, and they, after putting a little pressure through the Rabbanim forced him that he should give up all the materials that he's using, so we should check what he's using. And we found he had a roll of linen, and he had little scraps and remnants of linen too. And since then, we found another 3 cleaners in Borough Park and in Flatbush that are actually mending talesim with pieces of linen. So this is why the Hamoidia put in an article this past week. But this is a chashash. So like what I'm trying to bring out, to be niza on Shatnez is you need siyata d'shmaya. And in order, and for that there's a special bracha from the Kamana. The Kamana says, Hazohe bekelayim, one who's careful not to wear Shatnez, Yarich Yomim b'olam hazeh b'olam habo v'lavarichus Yomim, in this world and in olam habo, le'yov et b'gilgul v'yenuach v'shonem al meshkovay v'yachayim v'yoylid bonim tzadikim. Had many mises of people who said that the zeicha to Elichet children was because they were niza on Shatnez. Chayim v'kayomim v'yizka gam b'olam hazeh l'kol tov, and even in this world there'll also be zeicha to a lot of good things. So this is the presentation in short. Now we'll give a few minutes if anybody wants to ask questions to clarify different things. Yes.
The Uggs you were referring to were only boots, not slippers. Or slippers were the thing.
So I have over here also an Ugg slipper. Here's an Ugg slipper that was also Shatnez. This Ugg slipper is wool, and the black stripes that you see over here are linen. And we also found it also recently in a moccasin also. So we found 3 types of Ugg, which is an issue.
Is it made in Australia?
It says Australia on it, but it's already made all over. Yes.
The Russian hats that have a polyester inside, you still wear that?
I'm not sure what you mean polyester.
And it was made in America.
Oh, the American ones, yeah. The American ones are usually okay. We've seen some of the Canadian ones that still have a lining, a recycled lining on the inside. But most of the American ones and Canadian ones are fine.
On the list that we need to check, I didn't see that we have to check slippers. How would anyone know if they check their slippers?
So, I don't know which list that you saw.
No, you was on your PowerPoint.
Oh, I
like,
didn't.
These things need to be, looked at. You said jacket, and
Right. So that was just a short list. In truth, I have a 10-page guide which goes through every single type of item, and it's on that list.
Yes.
I could email it or through the we can try to get it to the item.
Maybe we should put somewhere. Whoever wanted should leave his email by me before leaving. But I have a question. If a store tells you that when you got a new line of jackets, you checked 2 of them and it was okay. So we could say not to check this jacket.
Let me speak out your question so everybody can hear. The question over here is, you go into a store and the store tells us that you checked 1 jacket or 2 jackets. Is that suffice to say that the entire run is okay and you don't need to check it? So, firstly, the way most of the garments today are made in China, the way things are made in China, I was in the actual factories, it's you have each seamstress is making that part of the suit with his own basket of materials, and then it gets assembled. So you can have the same run of suits. Some of them will have this type of materials inside, and others will have other materials inside. And this is why we find lines of suits, but only 10% are Shatnez. And we have right now, I know in the hat box they're selling suits. Bulgari, the name is, and only a small percentage of them have Shatnez. There's other suits called Leos by AI Stone in Lakewood. They're also the same thing. Tiglio suits. That every type of suit that we're finding Shatnez is only a small percentage. So really anything that's coming from China has no chazaka. So if you only test 1 or 2, that's definitely not sufficient. In addition to that, there's a Marsham. The Marsham says that on something that's a davar temidi, you're not soymech on roiv and chazakas. Which means a jacket, an article of clothing you're wearing constantly. So since you're wearing it constantly, that's not something that we can rely on roiv and chazakas. We'll be soymech on roiv and chazakas for chad pami, for one-time use. But something which is being used multiple times, many times, but that would not soymech on roiv and chazakas. Last year, Lag BaOmer, I was zeicher to go into Reb Chaim Kanievsky, and I asked him this shaila. I didn't ask it to him, I wrote it up on a piece of paper, and I presented it to him. And the question that I asked, because I get this question all the time, the store owner says he never had Shatnez in this type, in this suit. Can you rely on what the store owner told you, or should you go get it checked at the laboratory? And Reb Chaim Kanievsky said that you should go get it checked. Tzorech levarer, said mekenzach nish verlassen. Those are the words that he used. So that's what makes it hard. Shatnez is not an easy mitzvah to do. If a person wants to make certain that he doesn't have shatnez in his clothing, so one has to do the right hishtadlus to do that, which is to get it checked.
What methods do you use to check for shatnez? Is it through magnification or just
So
visually, or is it what?
There's two ways to test. One way is through the microscope. All the fibers under the microscope, you can see exactly, they have their own characteristics, their own look, their own appearance. And then, but if we were going to only test through the microscope, it would take us too long to test every type of garment. So that's why we have training in Tviyas Ayin. Tviyas Ayin means we can visually see the differences between all the different types of fibers. So in other words, we use both. We use Tviyas Ayin and we use the microscope. Whatever is quicker.
I have a question. Maybe two questions. One is about the talus. You mentioned that the tailor was taking scraps, right? So when the tailor buys these material, what is he buying? Scraps? He doesn't know what it is?
So that's the answer. Of course, if they would buy the material from a reputable company, the company will tell them that it's linen. But a lot of times they're buying fabrics from jobbers, from remnants.
Saying end of the roll.
Yes, so then when it's coming not through the regular channels, so then there's
Okay.
usually no content label on
Okay,
it.
and also, what about buying like a pair of pants that's linen? You're wearing with tzitzis or wool, like, is there a problem or a risk? Just
So what the shaila that you're bringing up now is beged al gaba beged.
yeah.
Can one wear two garments, one that is wool and linen? So, midday raisa, you need a connection of wool and linen. But however, wearing a beged al gaba beged, that's a issa de rabbana, and that's mentioned in the Ramah. That's mentioned in Siman Shin, Sif Dalet, end of Sif Dalet, where the Ramah says, since it's ef shelivshet hatachtoina beli livshet elyona, one cannot remove the one underneath, only first remove the one on top. That's considered a chibur. So therefore, you're wearing a linen shirt under a wool jacket, which could happen in the summer. So according to the Ramah, that will be a problem because you can't remove the shirt only if you first remove the jacket.
But pants would be okay.
So pants, a linen pant and a wool jacket, that wouldn't be a problem. If you're wearing wool tzitzis under a linen shirt, that also wouldn't be a problem because you can pull out the wool tzitzis.
But the shirt could be, let's say, Raif cotton. Let's say 60% cotton shirt with 40% linen.
So there you get into the shilas of bit.
Right.
So,
I'm saying practically they sell them in the store.
so if it's holding by, once we reach 30% already, then we're not mashing it. And we consider it a linen item.
30%.
In truth is,
There's 30% linen.
if there's already 30% linen, according to the Shulchan Aruch, in order to be considered a chut of tzemeh, a chut of pishtan, it has to be 50%.
Right.
But since there's other factors, there's factors of nikah, and there's maimid, there's different hilchos bittul,
Right.
so therefore once we reach 30% already, then we're already machmir.
Very interesting. Thanks. And also, what about trousers, like wool pants? Is there any? Do they have to be checked if they're not bought with a suit, like bought by themselves?
So the question is, trousers or pants, is that a problem of Shatnez? Mr. Rosenberger, who was the first person who brought Shatnez to America, in his days, the most Shatnez that was found was in the jackets. He would bet 2 out of 3 people are wearing Shatnez. He was ready to give $1,000. He would bang on the bima and say he's ready to give $1,000 if he's saying the wrong thing. If 2 out of 3 people over here in this space of Medrash are not wearing Shatnez. Because then in those days, all jackets had Shatnez in them. Now, he was pushing Shatnez very, very stark. And this was the main focus, so he put the main dagesh on the jacket in his day. But now it's Achshadara, people are checking more, people are more nissa in mitzvahs, we're trying to be mekayim every mitzvah in the best possible way. And we do find Shatnez in pants. We don't find as often. Right now we've just found in M&S, which is Marks and Spencer pants from England. We found a whole line of them that behind the clip of the pants there's a piece of linen. So it's not found as often. And also Mr. Rosenberger didn't put the dagesh on pants. So that's why there's this hashkafa rishayna that pants don't need to be checked.
Thanks.
What about the chazaki that you mentioned about China, right? There's no chazaki because they use different scrap. What about other countries? They, okay, let's say Italian made. They use also different kind of scrap or?
So the reason why we mention China is because most garments are coming from China. That's what's happening right now. The Italian are more, they're more systematic, they're more consistent. So usually the Italian clothing, once maybe you check 20%, then you can apply a chazaka. But in Chinese, even if I check 20%, I won't be able to apply a chazaka.
So
But
the
in
tshuva that you asked him is made in China or you asked him the
I asked him, can you rely on the store? The store owner says it doesn't have shot. That's what I
And when in the tzitzis, when does it apply a sadeh chalosas? Is it in the mitzvah itself or does it?
asked. That asay derech eloy saseh by tzitzis